What if I told you that roughly 23.5 million Americans live in food deserts in 2026? What if I told you that where you can buy groceries is not by accident, but the result of decades of racial policy? And what if I told you that food deserts in Black communities were built by design, not by chance? I'm about to share with you the how. How did we get to a place living in the year 2026 where we have communities that do not have adequate food access? And how did this happen to Black communities and communities with people of color only? Before I break this down, make sure you hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because this is the historical knowledge you should have, the kind of history they prefer to keep under lock and key. Before we dive into the how redlining created food deserts and why Black communities have been systematically denied access to healthy food, make sure you're subscribed. This is the kind of historical analysis that explains why 8.3 million Black Americans can't easily access fresh food in 2026. Across the United States, access to fresh, affordable, and nutritious food is not distributed equally. While some neighborhoods enjoy multiple supermarkets, farmers markets, and organic grocery stores within walking distance, others lack even a single full-service grocery store. These areas are commonly referred to as food deserts and in many cases food swamps. Communities saturated with fast food outlets, convenience stores, and liquor stores that offer calorie-dense but nutrient-poor options. Approximately 8.3 million Black residents in the United States lack easy access to fresh, healthy food, according to data from the McKinsey Global Institute and the McKinsey Institute of Black Economic Mobility. Black communities are more than twice as likely as white neighborhoods to lack a nearby supermarket. Let that sit in for a moment. More than twice as likely. These disparities are not accidental nor coincidental. They are the direct result of a long history of systemic racism, discriminatory public policy, economic exclusion, and corporate decision-making that prioritizes profit over equality. The food deserts seen today are rooted in America's racist past, particularly redlining, disinvestment, segregation, and economic marginalization. Understanding how these forces shape the modern food landscape is essential to addressing the health and economic inequalities that persist today. If you're starting to see how food deserts didn't just happen, but were created by policy, stay with me, because what I am about to show you next is how redlining in the 1930s directly connects to the grocery store that does not exist in our neighborhoods today. One of the most significant contributors to food deserts is the practice of redlining. Beginning in the 1930s, federal housing policy systemically denied mortgage loans and investments to predominantly Black neighborhoods. The Homeowners Loan Corporation created color-coded maps labeling Black neighborhoods as hazardous for investments. Banks, insurers, and developers followed these maps, refusing loans to residents in redlined areas. This process did more than restrict home ownership. It created a cascading effect of economic isolation. Without access to loans and capital, Black neighborhoods struggled to attract new business, including supermarkets. Infrastructure deteriorated, property values stagnated, municipal services declined. Meanwhile, white neighborhoods, coded green or blue, received favorable loans and development subsidies. Grocery store chains followed the money and built stores where investments flowed. As the suburbs expanded after World War II, aided by federal highway construction and housing subsidies, white families moved into newly developed suburbs with ample commercial infrastructure. Black families were largely excluded from these opportunities. Over time, the lack of investment in black neighborhoods became self reinforcing. Businesses cited low property values and limited consumer spending as reasons to avoid these communities, conditions that were themselves created by discriminatory policy. Thus, the absence of supermarkets in many black communities today is not the result of poor planning or coincidence. It is the legacy of federally sanctioned racial segregation and economic exclusion. As suburban growth accelerated in the mid 20th century, major grocery store chains began relocating from urban centers to wealthier, predominantly white suburbs. This pattern, often referred to as supermarket redlining or supermarket flight, left many black neighborhoods without full service grocery stores. Justifications: retailers frequently justified their departure by citing crime rates, lower profit margins, logistical challenges. But studies show race, not just income. Studies have shown that predominantly black neighborhoods often have fewer large supermarkets than white neighborhoods, even when income levels are similar. This indicates that race, not just income, has played a decisive role in retail placement decisions. Supermarket flight mirrors early patterns of white flight, where white residents left racially integrating neighborhoods. When middle class residents left urban centers, tax bases declined, reducing public investment and further discouraging corporate presence. Residents were left with small corner stores that stocked limited produce, if any, and charged higher prices due to smaller purchasing power and distribution disadvantages. Supermarket redlining is not just a historical phenomenon, it continues today. Retail chains still analyze neighborhoods through profitability models that often reflect and reproduce racial bias embedded in decades of inequality. Economic inequality is both cause and consequences of food deserts. Due to centuries of discriminatory labor practices, housing exclusion, unequal education funding, and wage gaps, Black Americans experienced higher poverty rates, lower average wages, and higher unemployment than white Americans. Lower purchasing power affects where businesses choose to operate. Supermarkets operate on thin profit margins and require steady consumer demand. Corporate decision makers often assume that low-income communities will not generate sufficient profit, discouraging investment in black neighborhoods. However, this reasoning ignores the structural causes of economic disparity. Black wealth was systematically stripped through the following: slavery, Jim Crow laws, discriminatory lending, employment discrimination, and mass incarceration. The racial wealth gap, shaped by generations of exclusion, limits access to capital, credit, and consumer spending power. Limited retail options restrict healthy food access, which contributes to diet-related illnesses. Poor health outcomes increase medical expenses and reduce workforce participation, further constraining economic mobility. In this way, economic disparities are not separated from food deserts. They are deeply intertwined. If you're starting to understand how redlining and white flight paired with supermarket redlining created food deserts, stay with me because what I am about to show you is the documented history that supports what you witness today. In many black neighborhoods, food deserts coexist with food swamps. Rather than an absence of food altogether, these areas are saturated with fast food restaurants, convenience stores, and liquor stores. These primarily sell processed, high fat, high sugar products. Research shows that black communities often have a higher density of fast food outlets compared to white neighborhoods. This concentration is not accidental. Corporate marketing strategies frequently target low-income and minority communities with advertisements for inexpensive, calorie-dense foods. These businesses are easier and cheaper to operate than full-service grocery stores. They require less square footage, fewer employees, less refrigeration infrastructure, and as a result, these proliferated in areas where supermarkets have withdrawn. The consequences are severe. Diets high in processed foods contribute to increased rates of obesity, hypertension, heart disease, and type 2 diabetes, conditions that disproportionately affect Black Americans. Food swamps illustrate how market forces exploit existing inequalities. Instead of meeting nutritional needs, the retail environment prioritizes profit from cheap, highly processed goods. Even when supermarkets exist within broader metropolitan areas, access is not guaranteed. Transportation plays a critical role. Redlining and urban planning decisions often isolated black neighborhoods from economic hubs. Highways were frequently constructed through black communities, displacing residents and fragmenting neighborhoods. Public transportation systems were designed to facilitate suburban commuting rather than inner-city mobility. Many residents of food deserts lack access to private vehicles. Without reliable public transportation, traveling several miles to a supermarket can require multiple bus transfers, hours of travel time, and carrying groceries on public transit. Thus, a supermarket 5 miles away may be functionally inaccessible. The spatial segregation created by discriminatory housing and infrastructure policies compounds the food access crisis. It is important to note that food deserts are not solely a function of income. Studies demonstrated that predominantly black neighborhoods have fewer large supermarkets than white neighborhoods with comparable incomes. This indicates that race itself remains a determining factor. Structural inequalities manifest in subtle but powerful ways, such as zoning decisions, commercial lending practices, insurance rates, and real estate appraisals. All of these influence where grocery chains will invest. Implicit bias can shape corporate site selection, lending decision makers to perceive black neighborhoods are risky and undesirable. These structural dynamics show that food deserts are not accidentally gapped in the market. They are predictable outcomes of systemic racism embedded within economic systems. If you're connecting how zoning, lending, insurance, and corporate bias all work together to create food deserts, you're seeing the system, because what comes next shows the health consequences of living in a food desert. Limited access to fresh produce and nutritious food directly contributes to diet-related illnesses. Black Americans experience higher rates of diabetes, hypertension, obesity, and cardiovascular diseases. These conditions are not simply the result of individual choices. They reflect constrained options shaped by structural barriers. When healthy food is scarce and expensive, fast foods are abundant and affordable. Dietary patterns follow environmental availability. Health consequences extend beyond individuals. Medical debt, reduced productivity, and shortened life expectancy affect families and communities across generations. Children raised in food deserts may face nutritional deficiencies and impair their cognitive development and academic performance, perpetuating cycles of disadvantage. Food deserts in Black communities are not natural occurrences. They are the direct results of historical redlining, economic disinvestment, supermarket flight, targeted marketing, transportation barriers, and enduring structural inequities. The statistic that 8.3 million Black Americans lack easy access to fresh, healthy food is not just a number. It is evident of a system that has consistently marginalized Black communities. The disproportionate absence of supermarkets in these neighborhoods reflect decades of discriminatory policy and corporate decision-making. Addressing food deserts requires more than opening new grocery stores. It demands confronting the racist history that created unequal landscapes in the first place. Policies must support community-owned food cooperatives, incentivize supermarket investments without displacement, improve public transportation, and close the racial wealth gap. Food access is not merely a matter of convenience. It's a matter of justice. Until the structural roots of inequality are disarmed, food deserts will remain a visible reminder of America's unfinished struggle with the racial inequality. Now, if this video showed you how the racial patterns of redlining and supermarket flight of the past contributes to the outcomes and inequalities in Black communities and communities of color we see today, then I need you to do something for me right now. First, subscribe and hit the notification bell. This is the kind of analysis that gets ignored or dismissed, and you need to see every video we release. Second, like this video and share it with your family, church, and your community. People need to understand how these systems work. Third, leave a comment and answer these questions so that others can learn. 1. How does understanding food deserts and supermarket flight change how you engage modern political actions that may produce better outcomes? 2. Have you ever lived in or seen a community in a food desert? What did you witness? Did they appear as healthy as others in communities with better nutritional options? 3. How do we teach the next generation to recognize these patterns to help them understand that they can make a difference? And fourth, explore the source and books on this topic in our complete Black History Library at the link in the description and the pinned comments below. Food deserts were built by redlining, supermarket flight was designed, and 8.3 million Black Americans still can't access fresh food in 2026. This was not an accident. This is a system. Subscribe, share, and speak the truth. I'll see you at the next video. Take care.